The city is reporting the worst air quality in the world right now. Plus,
there need to be more resources.
A bumpy start to what's expected to be a record-breaking holiday travel weekend. How airlines and the Department of Transportation are responding. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez, and the Supreme Court once again overturning decades of precedent. The justices ruling race can no longer play a role in college admissions, effectively ending affirmative action. Demonstrations from people on both sides of the issue played out in front of the High Court after that ruling. And tonight, we're hearing from the president of Harvard University, whose admission practices were at the center of this case.
For nearly 9 years, Harvard vigorously defended our admissions process and our belief that we all benefit from learning, living, and working alongside people of different backgrounds and experiences. We will comply with the court's decision, but it does not change our values.
The National Desk, Dr. El-Nashar, joins us now from Washington to explain what's covered in the lengthy opinions.
In a 6-3 decision released Thursday morning, the court ruled admissions programs at two of the country's oldest universities, Harvard and University of North Carolina, violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Dr. Dwayne Kwesi Wright teaches higher education administration and leads diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at George Washington University. He explains the courts now set new rules. If a school wants to consider race, they need to have concrete goals.
There has to be, quote unquote, a logical endpoint to your program, and race cannot be used as a, quote unquote, negative or stereotype.
The petitioner, Students for Fair Admissions, argued Asian and white students were being discriminated against. The conservative think tank Center for Equal Opportunity agrees.
It's led to this stigma as well throughout American society that individuals who are black or brown who are successful have only gotten there because of affirmative action.
President Biden calls the decision a severe disappointment, giving this advice to schools.
They should not abandon their commitment to ensure student bodies of diverse backgrounds and experience that reflect all of America.
The majority opinion says a student can still discuss how race has impacted their life in the essay portion of their application. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote the dissenting opinion, equates that to, quote, lipstick on a pig. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson writes, deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. The decision clashes with previous Supreme Court rulings in decades past, like Grutter v. Bollinger, which ruled the University of Michigan's use of racial preference in admissions did not violate the Equal Protection Clause. That was 2003. Then Justice Sandra Day O'Connor wrote in the majority opinion then, we expect that 25 years from now, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today.
Now, 2003, Eugene, that was 20 years ago, not 25. However, years later, records showed that O'Connor did not actually view that as a hard deadline, more of a suggestion or aspiration. Meanwhile, both Harvard and UNC, you just heard from Harvard's president, reacting to this right away and making it clear that they'll have to reevaluate, by law, how they factor race into their admissions. Because of the ambiguity, though, of the opinion, there is likely to be more litigation to come. Now, as colleges and universities try to still be inclusive in their admissions and roll out these new practices.
And here's one possible way. The court says that race can be considered in essays. Are there non-racial factors that can be used instead to meet inclusion and diversity goals?
Yeah, and to level the playing field. Dr. Wright, who you heard from in that piece, tells me a big step toward that would be getting rid of legacy admissions, which opens up opportunities to only a select, often elite, often white class of students. President Biden also encouraging schools to give serious consideration to the financial status of a student's family, where they grew up, where they went to high school, and their personal experiences with discrimination, like they might detail in an essay, including racial discrimination. Eugene?
Dr. El-Nashar at the nation's capital tonight. Thanks so much.
We, the jury, find as follows as to the defendant in this case. The defendant is not guilty.
Breaking news, emotional moments in a Florida courtroom. The school resource officer on duty during the Parkland school shooting was found not guilty. Prosecutors saying he ignored his training, but his defense said he couldn't respond because he couldn't tell where those shots were coming from. He was acquitted on all counts of child neglect and negligence. Developing now, more than 100 million Americans are under air quality alerts today as smoke from Canadian wildfires continues to drift over the U.S. You can see it here on this map. Some of the hardest hit cities, we're talking about Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Nashville as well, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., New York City also getting lots of smoke. Chicago residents, though, woke up to the worst air quality in the world. By tomorrow morning, the highest smoke concentrations will likely cover parts of the mid-Atlantic and the interior Northeast. This smoke expected to mostly clear up by the weekend. Still, the National Weather Service said there appears to be no end in sight, with Canada's fires expected to continue throughout the summer. And we're also looking at another day of dangerously high temperatures. 60 million people across a dozen heat alerts, a dozen states, are under heat alerts again. Today's warnings, you see them here, including Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, and Nashville as well. The National Weather Service warning that it could feel like 120 degrees outside during the hottest part of the day. The heat wave has already been linked to at least 13 deaths. Developing now, today marks the beginning of the July 4th holiday travel period. AAA expecting it will be record-breaking this year, but it's off to a pretty rough start. Airlines are still playing catch-up from the technical issues and severe weather from earlier this week. Already 4,700 flights have been delayed. Another 1,300 were outright canceled. United Airlines reporting the biggest share of those disruptions. Their CEO blames the FAA, and the Transportation Secretary agrees there are changes that need to be made.
They've really been struggling this week, even relative to other U.S. airlines. But where we do agree is that there need to be more resources for air traffic control. That's why we're hiring 1,500 more controllers this year.
And now hundreds of people who arrived at their destinations didn't make it there with all of their bags. The National Desk's Kelly Lynn spoke with people outside of Washington, D.C. about their growing frustration.
Nicole Ray's son lost his luggage on Sunday, and Wednesday afternoon, she was still waiting for it to show up.
His flight was delayed approximately 4 times before they decided to cancel the flight completely. They ended up sending him to Charlotte that same night, and his grandparents went to pick him up.
The 18-year-old made it to his destination, but his baggage didn't. Tanya Raza had planned to be in Tampa on Monday with her daughter and mother. After multiple flight cancellations, she canceled her trip.
And we come down here to get our luggage, and they said that, oh, we cannot find it. And I said, that's not acceptable because my mom's medicine was there. She's 80-year-old.
We reached back out to Tanya and Nicole, who did finally find their bags. But what about the owners of all of this luggage? I called Sean Bryant in Atlanta, who told me he thought his bags were in Amsterdam, where he had recently traveled.
So you didn't find out that your bags were at Dulles until I called you?
Yes. Yeah, this is the first I'm hearing of it completely.
In this letter from United Airlines CEO, Scott Kirby blames what he calls unprecedented challenges on understaffing and lower experience at the FAA.
That was Kelly Lynn reporting. Another potentially disrupting event that we're tracking here starting Saturday. Some planes won't be able to fly in bad weather because of 5G interference. Most major airlines are now in compliance with the new equipment requirements, but Delta says it still needs to make that change on 190 planes. Keeping up with your money now. Several key economic reports out today. We'll start with the jobless claims. Last week, having the biggest decrease we've seen in 20 months. The Labor Department said 239,000 Americans filed claims for unemployment benefits last week. That's a drop of 26,000. The number much lower than the 265,000 applications that economists had been expecting. The services sector, including leisure and hospitality, fueling that job growth. And a new report on the GDP shows the economy grew 2% in the first quarter. That's better than economists expected, but still lower than what we saw toward the end of 2022. Now, they believe that drop-off is due to the continued rate hikes that we've seen. The final report gives us a look at how those rates are affecting the housing market. Listen to this. Pending home sales fell last month, even though May is usually one of the busiest months of the year for real estate deals. With mortgage rates at about 7%, current homeowners are choosing to stay put, meaning there's less inventory out in the market. Last month, there were about 3 offers for every listing. New tonight, for the first time, we're seeing a change in public opinion surrounding former President Donald Trump. A new AP North poll shows his support among Republicans has dropped since his indictment in the classified documents case. It found 60% view him favorably, while it's still a solid majority. That number is down 6% since April. And now 38% of Republicans view him unfavorably. That's an 8% increase from the poll taken before the indictment. New tonight, Hunter Biden has settled his child support case out of Arkansas. As part of that deal, he's agreed to give some of his paintings to his daughter. and her mother dropped her attempt to change the girl's last name to Biden. Hunter Biden reopened this case last year, requesting that the court lower his child support payments. It's not clear whether the payments changed as part of this deal. New details tonight on a potential UPS strike. The Teamsters Union now demanding the final offer from UPS tomorrow. If they don't reach a deal, more than 340,000 employees plan to walk off the job when the current contract expires. Now, they've already agreed on several issues, things like air conditioning in new delivery vehicles, but money remains the major sticking point there. Coming up here on the National Desk, new information tonight about the Chinese spy balloon that flew over the U.S. earlier this year, where the military says the surveillance cameras on that balloon came from. Then new research on painkillers, why doctors say you may be better off skipping them. And we break down the new technology firefighters in one state are adding to their arsenal, how it could drastically cut response time. We're back in 90 seconds. Breaking news now, rapper Travis Scott will not face charges related to the deadly crowd surge at one of his concerts. A Texas grand jury did not find enough to move forward with a criminal case in the death of 10 people. Houston police and federal officials had been looking into whether Scott and his concert promoter had the correct safety measures in place for a crowd of that size. Well, tonight, more than 150 people are facing charges after a night of destructive riots in Paris. Thousands of people there taking to the streets to protest the deadly police shooting of a 17-year-old. The French government deployed 40,000 officers to neighborhoods that saw the most significant damage, and all train and bus lines will shut down at 9 p.m. to protect transportation workers as well as passengers. That officer who shot the teen will be charged with murder. New details tonight on that Chinese spy balloon that floated over the continental U.S. The Wall Street Journal reporting it was loaded with American-made equipment. According to a Navy analysis of the debris, it had commercially available U.S. gear attached to specialized Chinese sensors. According to that analysis, those were designed to transfer pictures and video. However, it doesn't appear any of it was transmitted to China. New details. The National Transportation Safety Board said today that the truck driver involved in that I-95 collapse earlier this month in Philadelphia lost control of the vehicle, causing it to roll over and catch fire. That's similar to what state officials have already concluded. The NTSB is still investigating this crash and collapse. The Justice Department has taken action against 78 people, including doctors and nurses, for defrauding Medicare and Medicaid. This alleged fraud involved 16 states, adding up to $2.5 billion. Officials say elderly people were targeted, as well as people with mental illnesses and opioid addiction. One scheme involved buying HIV medications from patients, then selling them to pharmacies. A new report from the Small Business Administration's Inspector General claims more than $200 billion in COVID-19 aid may have been stolen, but the SBA standing by the $36 billion figure from its own analysis. Either way, money ended up in the wrong hands. Pandemic business loan fraud has struck a nerve for people like Winnie Thompson, whose small business, Books and Bros, didn't get government aid.
There are businesses, in addition to us, who have, been in dire need of support. It is very frustrating.
The SBA's Inspector General will testify to Congress about his findings on July 13th. New details. Court documents show the man accused of murdering 2 teenagers in Indiana confessed during a phone call with his wife. Richard Allen is charged with killing Libby German and Abby Williams back in 2017. Now, the judge in the case has released more than 100 documents. They include a description of a call Allen made this April. Investigators say in that call, Allen admitted several times that he killed those girls. The deputy commander of Russian troops in Ukraine, General Sergei Surovikin, was arrested on suspicion of knowing about the attempted coup and possibly helping, according to the Moscow Times. A Russian military blogger wrote that the general was being held in prison despite Russian news outlets reporting he'd been released. The Kremlin today not commenting on this. Ukrainian officials say it's time for NATO to clarify its position on the country's membership. The country's foreign minister saying in a tweet today that Ukraine is actively working with NATO allies on the matter. President Zelensky of Ukraine arguing that Ukrainian troops would strengthen the alliance. Ukraine's relationship with NATO is expected to be discussed at a summit in July. A stunning new report may have parents rethinking their child's education. The National Desk's Angela Brown breaks down that study and finds charter schools are outperforming traditional public schools.
The research is coming from Credo, a nonpartisan, independent team of researchers from Stanford University in California. It's their 3rd national study. In 2009, they found that traditional public schools outperformed charter schools. This new report revealing the opposite. The 2023 National Charter School Study from Credo, the Center for Research and Education Outcomes at Stanford University, is showing a stunning turnaround.
We look at how much students learn from year to year as measured on the state-mandated achievement tests.
Credo teaming up with 29 states, D.C., and New York City, comparing nearly 2 million charter school students to their identical experience in traditional public schools, covering student learning from 2014 to 2019.
This time, we found that students who are enrolled in charter schools tend to do better in their learning over a year's time than they would have learned had they gone to their traditional schools.
The study found that students gained 16 days of learning and reading in charter schools, 6 days in math. Urban charter school students had 29 additional days in reading, 28 days in math, finding outsized gains for Black, Hispanic, and students in poverty.
Charter schools largely locate in communities where the students who live there have had historically disadvantaged opportunities for education. So great results for Blacks, Hispanics, students in poverty, ELL, is good news for those communities as well as for those students.
Charter schools didn't make the grade in other areas, finding online charter schools underperformed, losing, for example, 124 days in math. Credo also points out that performance varies by school and also by state. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
New research out of Australia suggests that opioids may not work very well for pain. A University of Sydney study finds that for people in their mid-40s with lower back or neck pain, opioids do not reduce pain better than a placebo. In fact, listen to this. The placebo group reported slightly less pain than the opioid group after 6 weeks, although it was not statistically significant. The artificial sweetener used in Diet Coke and thousands of other products is set to be declared as a possible carcinogen next month by the World Health Organization. Reuters reports the World Health Organization's cancer agency is conducting a review of aspartame, and declaring it a possible carcinogen means that there is some limited evidence linking aspartame to cancer. The food industry argues that research has been discredited. Coming up on the National Desk, another state legalizing recreational marijuana starting Saturday. A doctor explains what to know before it becomes more accessible. We'll be right back. The National Desk's team of 4,000 local journalists taking the pulse of America, and we start with an emergency plane landing in Ohio.
Back on solid ground, it's a selfie of relief and disbelief.
It wasn't panic. I think everybody was super concerned, as I was. I was nervous about what happens when you land. You think the worst and hope for the best, and that's what it was.
A short flight from Atlanta to Charlotte taking an alarming turn just before landing.
The pilot came back on and he said, yeah, we just confirmed that our front landing gear is not down.
Passengers told to get out their safety instructions and prepare to get in the crash position.
It was amazing, almost like they practice this often. I'm sure they don't, but it was amazing how well executed everything happened.
It's a feeling some may already know.
People use it and then they say they experience some good feelings, euphoria, sometimes relaxation. There's also the bad. People can feel anxious. They can feel paranoid.
But for those who've never dabbled with a doobie or eaten an edible, weed will be recreationally legal starting Saturday. For some, it may bring a little curiosity about cannabis. So we asked bluntly, what happens if someone uses too much?
In most cases, nothing that'll get you to the where I work, the ER. But very rarely we have people that are experiencing like a lot of anxiety, a lot of paranoia, a lot of even psychosis.
Born and raised in Reedley, Alexis Eliza Macedo is a playwright and producer who stars as Lulu in her play Chicana Legend. The 90-minute play is set to make its East Coast debut in Atlanta in August.
I didn't grow up speaking Spanish because there was that expectation of be very assimilated and be very Americanized. And so I thought, well, it feels like I'm too brown or too assimilated, and it feels like I'm just trying to play this game that wasn't designed for me to win. And I thought, oh, let's put this story in a video game.
The play follows 11-year-old Lulu through age 23 as she fights to overcome obstacles in her community and make choices that will impact her future.
Up next, firefighters preparing for wildfire season in California. The new tool they're using to put out flames faster. New tonight, 4 NFL players are suspended for gambling violations, and 3 of them will have to sit out the entire 2023 season. The NFL saying that Isaiah Rodgers and Rashad Berry of the Colts, along with free agent Demetrius Taylor, were suspended for the entire 2023 season for betting on NFL games. Meantime, Tennessee Titans tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere is suspended for 6 games for placing a non-NFL bet at a team facility. Authorities are investigating an incident where a Delta Airlines plane was diverted because of an unruly passenger. That plane was flying from Detroit to Fort Lauderdale yesterday when it was diverted to Atlanta. The airline did not provide details about exactly what happened, but said Delta does not, quote, tolerate threats and abuse of any kind towards our people. New tonight, one of California's largest utilities asking for a $7 billion loan to cut down on wildfire risk. PG&E says it would use that money to move power lines underground and make some other upgrades to the grid. The utility's equipment has sparked more than 20 major wildfires in recent years, including the Camp Fire that killed 84 people. If this is approved, that loan will come from the Department of Energy. In the meantime, CAL FIRE adding a new tool to its arsenal: drones. You see them here. They carry a small ping-pong-sized device that can drop flame retardant. They can also start fires for prescribed burns. CAL FIRE says the equipment minimizes the risk for firefighters by keeping them out of some dangerous areas. And they also speed up the response since they don't need to deploy helicopters to get to remote parts. Ahead of the holiday weekend, the Consumer Product Safety Commission holding its annual firework demonstration, showing how quickly they can become dangerous. They used mannequins and watermelons to simulate the damage there. They say most children who are injured by fireworks usually are bystanders and aren't the ones who are setting them off. That's why they recommend that families skip backyard fireworks and instead go to a professional show. New tonight, college sports viewership is on the rise, even outside of football and men's basketball. ESPN says this year's College World Series was the most watched ever. The audience for the championship series was up 75% from last year. The women's basketball national championship also breaking some viewing records, along with the men's lacrosse final and the women's World Series. The streak is over. Yankees pitcher Domingo German threw the first no-hitter in Major League Baseball since 2012. He allowed no hits and no walks on 99 pitches. It is the 24th perfect game in MLB history, and he is the first pitcher born in the Dominican Republic to accomplish that feat. Tonight, another big comeback in the works for women's sports. Caroline Wozniak is returning to professional tennis for the U.S. Open 3 years after she retired to start a family. The former #1 overall says she decided to make a comeback after the birth of her son, saying she realizes she's still got some things to accomplish. She says one of those is proving that you can pursue your goals no matter your age or role. That's going to do it for us for now. Join me again tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. You want to check your local listings for the exact time. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Thanks for watching. See you soon.